Right, hello, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you are in the world. So today we're having a conversation, I'm having a conversation with George. And typically it's always in the office in London, right? We have our setting, we have our setup, and we hash it out. But considering that, I would say even from not just me following you, my team who also follows you were like, you really need to speak to George. Like you and George will really get on. So we've broken mandate for this interview. I'm not even gonna call it an interview, for this conversation. But I'm excited to talk to you, George. I know you are doing your own things in your own way within the Bitcoin SV community and with what you wanna make your impact be. I'm gonna let you speak on that very shortly. But for those who are watching Bitstocks and those who are subscribers at Bitstocks, please, I know who you are, but please introduce yourself, mate.
Sure. I'm George Siosi Samuels, the founder of Faiā. Our social media handle is at Faiā Corp. Essentially what we do at this point in time, we're consultants. I'm very much a fan of the project-based business model. I'll get into a little bit later about like what I used to do. But we essentially have two lines. One is community, the other one is blockchain/Bitcoin SV. And the reason why I explain it like that at the moment, still working on our social pitch, is that we just found that both of those passion areas of mine personally, people who'd come for one line of service would end up inquiring about the other. So that's why we have this weird, unique overlap that we're starting to make a name for ourselves in, which is, essentially communities and tech. And what was interesting is that even last night, I heard that the World Economic Forum, they're trying to introduce or create a manifesto about stakeholder capitalism, right? Because they're saying that communities, right, need to start being part of the capitalist model, which is interesting. And I think we're gonna get into all the politics around it. But I'm very much a gut instinct-driven person. It serves me well when I've listened to it, hasn't when I haven't. And a lot of things just kept pushing me to where I am now.
You mentioned a key word there as you was explaining that. You referenced passion, right? And that word and business has to go together. And that's when you actually create quite unorthodox business models because it's a passion-driven thing. And when you attack anything with passion, the commitment and the processes that you take in order to achieve the goal is that you set out to achieve is attacked with just that much conviction.
Exactly.
And this is the aspect that I've got that vibe from you online. Whatever it is that you're doing, right, which I don't know the details of, which is why I'm on the conversation with you right now. I'd love to get to know a little bit more. But I can definitely tell that you have an aura about you that is very passion driven, very community driven, very pro-humanity driven. And you're taking that philosophy and you're applying it to a business model. And that's what I find quite interesting with anyone out there who's doing these things, because I take myself as a perfect example of someone who's trying to take, I guess, what we traditionally considered as spiritual-esque ideals and a spiritual-esque mentality, but I'm also very aggressive in terms of business, right? I have great business acumen. In fact, I set up my first business when I was only 16 years old. But taking the teachings of, say, spirituality, to just abbreviate it down to a term right now, and how that can be utilized as a great fuel in business is going off the back of what you've just said, because what they're talking about in terms of capitalism and all these things, it sounds like to me with what you just said, they had a penny drop moment that you could create all of these financial systems and you could create all of these terminologies for these financial systems. But guess what? You're dealing with human beings at the end of the day.
It's the heart and soul, man. I think one of the problems, at least that I've seen over the last either century or a couple of decades, is that we've disassociated ourselves from what used to be very, I guess you could call it sacred enterprise. Everything sort of had a sacredness about it once upon a time. And I've taken a lot of from my own culture. So my background is my dad's Fijian Indian. My mother is Tuvalu and Samoan. So I was very much influenced on my mother's side, raised mostly by women. So, the feminine power was very strong. And so that's probably what balanced me out in terms of, being in tune with a lot of things and the spirituality. So that was there from very young with my mom, stories, ancestors. But then I was raised in the West, so there is that individualistic side. But I think as I got older, you were talking about like the philosophy and the spirituality. There was an experience that I had in 2008 that involved wolves. And you might see every now and then, right, I post things about wolves. And that's actually what influences a lot of my work around communities, because what I found out about wolves is that they are like master teachers of balancing individualism and what, crypto Twitter calls collectivism. I'm actually, I don't see those two things as, good or bad. They just need to work in harmony. And wolves have taught me how to make that happen in a community setting as well.
So when you say, you mean you had an experience in a spiritual animal S type of way, that's your spirit animal? Was it, how you have to...
Yeah, I know how you do it.
Kicking it at, if you're not sitting it, kicking it at just chilling at my place or chilling at your place or chilling at a bar in a setting, you wouldn't be able to skim across that comment without me asking you to contextualize it, right?
For sure.
But because the camera's on, I almost hesitated. But that's not my nature. Screw, I guess, how we think people are going to perceive this conversation. Apply some more context to that. So what do you mean by you had experience with wolves?
It's time, man. Let's do it. It's interesting. I've kept this story only to like select few who I know get it. But, some things are happening this year that has convinced me that it's time to like start speaking more about it. So the original story, in 2008, it was a time in my family's life where there was a lot of bad stuff going on. And my family are a family of dreamers. And that meaning that like from very young, we were always taught to sort of recall our dreams. And when we wake up, share it with the family and sort of discuss it, whatnot. Anyways, a few things happened in our family. At the time, my parents were getting a divorce. And I had this dream that essentially told me to go to New Zealand. Don't know why, but it was just so compelling. I knew I had to. So the decision was made in my mind. I had to go to New Zealand for whatever reason. And I was with my partner at the time, and she, agreed to go. So we saved up, we planned. And then just a little bit before I went to New Zealand, there was an accident where I like really sprained my ankle bad, and the doctor was like, "You can't go." And no joke, when I was at the doctor's office, I was like, "No, I have to go. Like, I don't care, about this. Like, I need to go." Right inside, something was telling me I had to go. So managed to go. Oh my God, that flight was definitely excruciating. But we go. I landed in New Zealand. Was going around multiple different cities, and then. We were going around different cities and it was a great trip, but nothing special happened, and I was starting to think, shit, maybe it was just me trying to force, something. But then on the last city, this was in Napier in New Zealand, we were walking through the town and there was a festival going on. Passing through a festival and I saw this little tarot reader and I was like, just for fun, I said to my ex, "Hey, you want to try it out?" And she was like, "No." She's Catholic. So she's like, "No, I don't do that stuff." And I'm like, "Nah, I'm going to try it out." So I go in, they do the reading. I don't say much because I always like testing them, right? How much they can find out without me saying anything. Right?
Same. That's what I do every single time.
Exactly. How good are you, right? And so then, this lady turned out to be more than just a tarot reader. She was a... Is it psychometry? What are the ones that can hold objects and get something off of it? There's a word for that.
So you got psychics, you got intuitive empaths.
Something like, anyways, her ability was the thing to like hold something and be able to glean from that. So she just asked me, I had this like jade pendant on, and she's like, "Is it all right if I hold?"
It's channeler, I guess.
Yeah. Right. And then she held it and then, she did her thing. And then she started telling me about a lot of stuff that was happening in my life with my parents, my family and whatnot. And I was like, not bad. Right. Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. And then we went out for dinner, came back to the hotel room, and I was like, wow, this is like my last day. Nothing special happened. And then it began. I go to sleep. In my sleep, I dreamt that I was back in Dhaka, Bangladesh. So I lived in Dhaka, Bangladesh for about 10 years. Went to an American international school there. So of course, we're originally from Fiji, Australia, Bangladesh, Australia, now Singapore. But I was in Bangladesh for 10 years. And in the dream, I was transported to our last house there. In this house, or at this house, there are sort of three doorways. There's the gate, between the house. And then there are two doors to get in. At the first gate was open. And there was this little white guinea pig following me into the house. And I was like, what the hell is this? And, I walked to the front entrance and I just continued to watch the white guinea pig make his way to me. And then I walk through the first door, close it, and there's a glass pane on the left. I look over and I see the guinea pig is still slowly making its way to me, right? Comes up to the door and then just starts, tapping like that. And I'm like, man, this is the weirdest shit. Anyways, there's a gap between the two doors. I take off my shoes, put it down. Then I start to hear like a little bit more tapping, faster tapping. I'm like, what the hell? And then more and more tapping like starts to occur. And then I start to get a little afraid because the noise is just getting louder and louder. And then I run through the second door, close it. And then the first door just bursts open. And a whole bunch of white guinea pigs just swarm through that area between the first door and the second door. And like water, right? And I'm already past the second door. I look over and this large glass pane. I can see all these random white guinea pigs. Right? I don't know why white guinea pigs, but all of them just floating around like water in this space. And then all of a sudden, there's just a loud bang on the second door. And when that bang happens, my body freezes. And then bang again. As soon as that second bang happened, my body just moved back. It just stepped back. Then the banging kept happening, just bang, bang, and got louder each time. And each time, my body kept moving back like this. Finally, I hit the ledge of the staircase behind me. And then when I hit the staircase, the ledge, I fell down, I sat down, and I was just sitting on the ledge. And then the second door bursts wide open, and this bright white light just shines out of the second door. Out of the white light emerges two white wolves with crystal blue eyes, right? And the size of them are like, the dire wolves or the wolves from Twilight, right?
Yeah.
And they walk through the door and they just slowly come to me. I am shit scared, right? Because these are two massive wolves. I have no idea why they're there, confused as hell. Yeah. And they continue to come to me until they stop right in front of me and look me in my eyes. At that point, it felt like they were downloading stuff into my head. And this went for years in the dream. So I was screaming in the dream and I could not move for years. And, well, so I felt, right?
Yeah.
After they had finished with me, I finally managed to like get one little gasp or scream out, right? And at that point is when I woke up. When I woke up, it was just a little, instead of a massive scream. I was sweating like crazy. And I turn over to my ex, wake her up, and I say, babe. She's like, what? I was like, what year is it? And she goes, what are you talking about? I'm like, how long have I been asleep? Right? And she goes, 15 minutes. Like, go back to bed. Right? Yeah. And from that point, that dream had such a profound impact on me. I then became obsessed with wolves. I studied everything about it. And it led me to some other people around the world who had the exact same dream. Right? Yeah. This was the wild bit. And all of the things I was learning about wolves was, they were like one of the original teachers. They can be found on almost every continent around the world or their descendants. Some of the greatest empires in the world, have their roots in like some sort of wolf mythology. The Roman Empire, right? The Mongols, the Turks, and the Native Americans themselves, right? The role of the wolf is usually a teacher or pathfinder. And So with that, I also learned that there are 4 or 5 different type of wolves that each have a different medicine. The white wolf is a Arctic is an Arctic wolf, right? So it means it's usually put into environments that are very harsh, very cold, and almost dead a lot of the times. It didn't make sense to me back then, but now looking back over the last decade plus, it makes sense now.
That's how it works, right? And this has been a continuous thread. I'm not going to say I shared that exact experience, but experiences like that I've had myself, and many around me have had very similar experiences. And the common thread between it all is once you start becoming awake, right? Not only do you start to notice things in your day-to-day life that other people are just oblivious towards, you start connecting pieces that have been there for years in your own life that only once you have obtained the ability of sight will you start to be able to connect those pieces together and realize that this whole time I'm trying to build this jigsaw puzzle that is life, right? And these pieces I've actually had in my back pocket for years. And that's when the power starts to come into it, because I say one thing that I've had a great advantage with is that I've just been a freaking weirdo my whole life in terms of how I look at things and how I perceive things. I always knew that I saw the world differently. What has changed is I was once embarrassed or ashamed or thought I was odd or weird for viewing the world differently. And that comes from your own personal journey, right? So that's a great aspect of spiritual evolution. And the reason why I wanted to speak to you on this subject, and I was actually excited to have the conversation with you about this, is because from the outside in, anyone that looks at anyone who is on a spiritual vibe instantly puts it into a hippie category, right? Yeah. And then people don't see the value in how it strengthens your own character to navigate through the world by just branding it to be a hippie thing. Because what these experiences ultimately lead to, if you understand them, if you're ready to receive the message that is being delivered, right? It gives you a much deeper, greater connection to yourself. So when you do go out into the world now, which is basically what I'm doing, is you are learning and you're humbling yourself that you are just a very, very small speck in the great vastness that is this universe. And if you really understand that statement, as a speck, you can change the world, right? So it's not that you're small and you're insignificant, because you are connected to the very universe itself. You're part of it. You're one part of that. So you're the smallest thing and you're the biggest thing at the same time, right? And when people then switch from being, say, the smallest thing and just looking around on a two-dimensional plane, then it's very easy to get caught up in differences, racial differences, cryptocurrency differences, all of these different differences, right? You're just looking at everything on a two-dimensional basis, three-dimensional basis, and you haven't really got a good sense of scale, right? But imagine you're sitting and you're chilling on the moon and you're looking down at Earth, right? Things are going to start looking, you're going to see a much bigger picture. Are you going to see all the divides? No, you're going to see human beings living on a planet, right? And I think the great aspect of the spiritual journey is understanding and realizing through the process of balance, right? That once you achieve this state, not flip-flopping over here. So here could be anxiety, fear of the future. Over here can be depression, fear of the past, right? And feeling really upset about the past and being depressed. And everyone in life essentially does this, right? So flip-flopping between anxiety, depression, future, past. Spiritual evolution is about being able to maintain an upright stance and position. It's not that you haven't done all of this stuff. You have done all of this stuff. But after going through all of this stuff, you've actually learned balance and a good sense of self and awareness that now you can walk your path in a trajectory that you've laid out for yourself because you understand the distortions and you understand your place in it all. And this is why I really like to try and spark as many of these conversations as possible. And it's always great when it's our demographic, because our demographic, we're not really doing this stuff right now. Unfortunately, there's so many more people who are inspired and woken up by everything that's going on out there and want to make a positive impact and buck trends and really break trends, because I see this as a huge advantage, having a very holistic approach to life, because when it then comes to business, and we're going into a hugely technologically advanced society, our civilization is drastically changing from a technological standpoint. What's really important is that, in my opinion, we have leaders out there and business owners out there who, are super technological, really understand the tech, really nerdy, really geeky, want to combine all of these things together and build amazing new innovations. But at the same time, understanding from a spiritual standpoint, we're human beings, right? And having a automated checkout at your local supermarket, which replaced the human being, that is actually a good thing. However, what needs to then be factored in is, all right, well, how much of this can be a good thing in every single aspect, and how do we then say automate your laborsome jobs and then create jobs which allow human beings to be what they truly are, which is creative, and to be allowed to exert their creativity, not based on limitations of a bank balance, but the limitations of their own limitations, right? And I think this is where technology really needs to go in order to unlock this door. Because right now, say, if we speak in a really hippie way and we say, okay, we're super pro-humanity and we're, say, negative on technology, then we have a very naive, and we should have the hippie hat on, and then people deserve to have that, I guess, tarnished approach towards spiritualist people in business. There needs to be a balance. So how are you going about trying to balance everything it is that you are and what it is that you stand for, and have that be what it should be, which is a great asset in your corner as you're approaching business? So you're doing Faiā Corp. So explain what it is, the connection between how you're trying to bring that personality through with now what you're doing at Faiā Corp.
Sure thing. So first up, brother, I love what you're doing. This is essentially the type of stuff as well that I've been slowly weaning in, because I know also that not everybody is always ready to hear it, but it takes courage for you to be able to speak out about it, And the world of finance, I think, is an area that needs more soul, in my opinion, and any traditional areas where it just has felt like it's lacking. But for Faiā, the word actually means, it's a Samoan word, and it actually means to span two divides like a bridge. So already the name itself is about bridging. It's also used to describe like bringing the village together, right? And that kind of taps into the community aspect. But on a much deeper level, I definitely am a fan of the Tao and yin and yang, having both. That's been a common theme throughout my life. And people in tech, this actually was inspired by a few things that happened, from 2008 up until now. One of them was the Eagle and the Condor prophecy. Have you heard of that before?
No.
Okay. So the Eagle and the Condor prophecy, for anyone, watching or listening, feel free to Google it. But essentially it's a prophecy from either the North or South Americans, the natives, about a time when the people of the North, known as the Eagle, and the Eagle representing, innovation, big picture thinking, etc., with the Condor people, who are the Southern people, who are all about the feeling, the emotions, etc. That there will be a time when the Eagle and the Condor would come together and fly together in the skies, because there was a big break between the two when, I guess, the Europeans managed to make their way into the Americas. So because of that severing, we've definitely seen that in sort of the type of thinking that has dominated the West versus the East, and in how it's often described. And that really spoke to me, because there was also the story of Atlantis in general, and what happened between the Atlanteans and Lemurians, right? So my ancestry is from the Polynesian side, the Asian, and that is historically, based on the myths, coming from Lemuria. And the Lemurian.
My blood starts dancing when anyone mentions the words Atlantis, and now you then also said Lemuria.
Yep.
No one speaks about that. So now I know you've done your research. Okay.
So
that's a 3-hour conversation just there.
No, so I will I will try to condense it. But essentially, this rang true because I've done some past life work as well. And I know that in a past life, I found myself at that point where, technology took over for the Atlanteans and they fucked up. So there are some theories that say that a lot of Atlantean souls have come in over the last however many decades, maybe from the 1940s, 1920s. And, a lot of the innovation that we're seeing, the reason why it's so accelerated is because a lot of these souls have come back at this point in time.
All right, we have to dance on this for about 10 minutes, right? So when you say a lot of these, because Shem wanted to go onto it because Shem's quite into this subject as well, Bitcoin SV channel host. And I always shut it down because I don't really want to veer into those. I actually want to have a dedicated episode maybe for this. Yeah. But I want to dance here just for about 10 minutes.
Sure.
So when you say Atlantis and souls coming in, where do you feel the original builder race for Atlantis came from? How was Atlantis even Atlantis? Where do you feel it was located? Just what is your understanding thus far as to what was Atlantis? Where was it located? And essentially, who were the kings of Atlantis?
So it's a mixture, but definitely not from this planet. Yeah, put simply, not from this planet. And I think a lot of the things now, we talk about gene editing, gene splicing, gene modification, right? That these are all remnants of the Atlantean times. A lot of experiments were done with the local species, right?
If you look at the story of Anu and Enki, the whole story of Anu and Enki is about genetic splicing. And Enki not fulfilling exactly what Anu wanted, and actually wanted to give human beings more and free will, right?
Yep. And it's amazing, right? The repetitions. It's funny because this connects to Bitcoin too. I see a lot of things being repeated, right? History being repeated over and over again. Where if we have, I know there's a lot of different theories around this, but say if we assume that this isn't the first time that the human race has gotten to this point in time, say it's a fourth or fifth time, right? I do feel,
and it's great evidence, right?
Right, and this is why I do like the what's coming out about the importance of nature and the importance of us, not just being about technology and profit, right? Because I think those would be the same mistakes of the past. If we don't learn, if we don't do something drastic now, we're gonna just go down that same path and we're gonna go back to square one. We think that just because we are in the future that we're superior or ahead. It's like, nah, man, if you also take the time to spend with indigenous people, right, which I was fortunate enough to have done back in the past because of some of the work I was doing. I was an animator once upon a time as well, and a programmer. So, I managed to spend some time, with a lot of indigenous groups and a lot of similarities to my own culture from my mom's side. And, they all talk about a lot of the ancient knowledge. There's going to be a time where we're going to go back seeking that. And
and a lot of these indigenous tribes still hold the most preserved, with integrity, information from these ancient times, right? And it's kept within these communities, and they're quite open and sharing about it, but our society has shut them out.
Right.
But if you go to these places, I'm sure that as you witnessed yourself, they're quite open to speak about certain things.
It's great.
Yeah, certain things. And then of course they like you and they know that you're pure, then you get access to different information. But there is pockets all around the globe. And this is, again, one of the things that I keep referencing back to my CoinGeek London talk, okay? Because I completely baked that presentation with very, very cryptic symbolism. And a lot of it even covers what we're talking about right now, right? And I was talking about the clustering of knowledge on the planet and then how we are mimicking that from a monetary standpoint, but a much deeper standpoint was really the relationship between the squared circle, the relationship between us and the squared circle, so Da Vinci, the Vitruvian Man being inside it, the sphere and the torus, and what this really all means. Because I am not someone who is going to sit here as a intellectual and say, I've discovered all of these things. I'm very humble in my approach, and I'm very much on a journey of rediscovery, because the ancients had this locked down. Today, we can boast having a car with 2,000 horsepower that could do 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds, not emit a freaking ounce of CO2 out the exhaust because it's completely electric, but yet we can't recreate the pyramids of Giza, right? So clearly we're nowhere near as technologically advanced as we think we are. So why is it when people like you and I then want to open up the question and say, I think the ancients were up to some pretty cool stuff, right? And there's validity behind the story of Atlantis, right? And there's all of these different evidence that points to there being an Atlantis. And there's all of this other evidence that also supports that, say for instance, the Sphinx in Egypt, right? There's water weathering on the Sphinx, which really completely, utterly debunks what archaeologists have said about the Sphinx, that is way, way older than what they've dated it to actually be. So, and this links back to the whole, is it his story or is it human history, right? Is it history or is it his story? And then when you then ask, okay, so if it is his story, what's the agenda as to why he told that story? Because people often say to me, okay, well, you're talking about these subjects, speaking about Atlantis, you're speaking about the spirituality aspect, you're speaking about all of these different things. What has it got to do with Bitcoin? What has it got to do with what's going on right now? And I was like, that is the effing problem. That is how the world has been able to get to this point, is because everyone assumes it's got nothing to do with the present moment. It has everything to do with the present moment. And Bitcoin, ironically, as a tool, will ensure that the trajectory of how humanity has been educated will stay pure, right? Because if we restart the next real spur of the human evolutionary cycle, right? That means in a couple of thousand years from now, people will look back at this as the ancient moment, right? So what difference is that we, as the ancients, would have created an immutable device that will allow the evolution of humanity to be traced back, right? And we can update all the existing information it is that we have out there and ensure that that's put on here as well. And that is a system that will ensure that society can be built on completely different foundations, because everything really is yin and yang. Positive, negative, malevolent, benevolent, right? And when you don't have transparency, then it all just maybe becomes too much one-sided, right? Where the malevolent agenda gets to run rife and has done for thousands of years. And this does go back to Atlantis now, because the whole root of Atlantis and also ties into the flood, the ark, a variety of different subject matters. It was and Nephilim, okay? The fallen angels in the Bible, who were they? Who's the Bible who is the Bible really referencing? And what is every single reference to the heavens in the Bible? What are they really speaking of, right? When they say heavens, what are they really speaking of when they say angels? And the great irony is, 15 years ago, I would have identified myself as an atheist, right? The irony is, the fact that I've always kept the open mind, even when skeptical, I always keep an open mind with a view to be enlightened. Trying to debunk religion actually made me realize the validity in religion is way more accurate, ironically, than people even realize if you can read it.
And understand, right? Because reading
and
is
understand.
Understanding is another.
100%. So for me, it's just a breath of fresh air to then see someone who's now building your own public profile, but also doing so in a way that you're being pure to yourself, irrespective of the inevitable scrutiny that will be coming your way. It's a journey that I'm on. It's great to have another brother of light on the same journey, bro. So
it's time.
You can speak about Atlantis here. It's all good.
Well, I definitely I wanted to let you finish your flow. But one thing that, the Bitcoin aspect, it's interesting. I remember texting this to Craig as well. And I had this aha moment when I was revisiting the Akashic records. And just the concept of it, and I realized that Bitcoin also is kind of like the physical manifestation of the Akashic records, right? And for those who are listening or watching and aren't familiar with the concept, it's essentially the book of records for everyone, for every soul, every event that is taking place. And apparently there are some in our reality that are able to tap into it very easily, right? A lot more so than others, but it's actually accessible by everybody. It's just that we have lost, the knowledge of how to do so. So it's interesting sorry, go for it.
Carry on, I'll touch on that in a bit. Go on.
But yeah, it's like that stuff is there. And, often in cartoons and movies, they'll, make jokes about like a god, sort of just checking things off, in a book.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what the Akashic records are. And I do believe in that because it's tied to karma. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. What goes around comes around. And so, a lot of people don't like the idea, right, of something being recorded forever, but they don't realize that it already is currently. You're just not aware of it.
100%. So just to elaborate on that a bit, and I'm really glad that you brought that point on and made the connection as well, because I have to be careful as to how I answer this to not spark too many business ideas. But the core of what you've just said is really genuinely what we're building here at Bitstocks. Gravity is building the infrastructure template to get people onboarded, and then we will be marching towards collectively building something that's far greater that can read off the field of Bitcoin. Because in order for Bitcoin to be able to resemble something like what you're describing, everything needs to be on top of it and everything needs to be communicating with it. Because if everything's on top of it and communicating with it, then Bitcoin is the fabric that becomes space-time. And this is why I'm making this connection, right? And an example of that in the Akashic record sense, so God recording everything, people need to have a much deeper understanding as to what is God. How would they define God, right? So that's divinity. And one of the common ways that people will attribute any divine action or divinity is creation, right? It's the creator, creation. So by that very definition, a really close example or something that is truly godlike is our parents. They are our creators. Okay, so you have, ironically, two pillars that come together, man, woman, and then form a new human being. And that new human being is directly tied into the root, and let's talk Merkle roots and Bitcoin transactions now, of the coming together of the man and the woman, which then created the child, right? So the whole concept of the universe beginning from an original seed and everything is spawned from that seed, and you go just think Bitcoin, think Merkle roots, Merkle trees, and how everything is then related and ultimately goes back up to that one, okay? Then you start understanding why there's always pillars outside of religious monuments, churches, temples, buildings. You have two pillars outside the doorway. All of this stuff got huge symbolic references mathematically, basically to what it is that I'm saying, which ties back to the Akashic records. Now, you as a one human being are one human being, but you are 100 trillion cells, right? And those 100 trillion cells have 100 trillion atoms. And if you think about that, what is that? At its most primitive level, what is that? It's energy. So you've got these particles spinning, right, at super, super high frequency, and you've got billions of chemical reactions happening in your body every second, okay, to then make you a functional biological whole. But you are an image that is recreating itself at a just very high frequency that people can't tell the in-between stages of your manifestation, demanifestation, manifestation, demanifestation, manifestation, demanifestation, because that is ultimately what's happening. And I actually challenge any physicist or mathematician with this to calculate the speed in which how my hand goes from here to here. Because conventional science would teach you that you have to measure the distance in which you traveled and the time in which it took to travel that distance. And then you've got a reference point, right? Say, for instance, my Lamborghini does 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, right? Well, yeah, that's an acceptable answer if I'm explaining it to a 6-year-old. But if you're now talking about physics, you have to factor in that the Earth is spinning. And the Earth is also spinning around the sun. And then the solar system is spinning throughout the cosmos. Now it becomes a really, really, really deep question. And when you get into it from that aspect, that you understand that your hand is actually dematerializing and rematerializing. And the rematerialization of your hand is the memory of your consciousness that it had at the prior state. So this is why I say the connection to Bitcoin is, if you don't remember yesterday, you don't know who George is today. Like point blank. I don't care how smart anyone is on this planet. If Craig wakes up tomorrow and he forgot that he was Satoshi today, he ain't fucking Satoshi anymore.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So the memory is what reconfigures your biology to manifest in this reality. So that is energy changing matter. That energy is being recorded on the fabrics of space-time. The Akashic records are speaking about this. And the Akashic records, therefore, are readable because your ether exists. It's out there. And another example of this would be if a record that stands for, say, 20, 30 years, an Olympic record, and as soon as it gets broken, it's then subsequently broken multiple times over because people see and they believe, oh crap, like this was done. And that then is downloading into global collective human consciousness. And we believe, fuck, I can do this,
yep.
Right? And then that record's subsequently broken. Another example of that would be, you've got a scientist on one side of the planet who invents something, tries to file a patent. You've got another scientist on the other side of the planet who's completely unrelated, never spoken to the geezer, doesn't even know that the guy's alive, and it tries to file for the same bloody patent, okay? I have had genuinely this very example myself this year with my work and what it is that I'm doing around energy, okay? So I started designing some crazy engines that will be free energy, basically. How do you create something that is of abundant energy? So I was just going through electromagnetism, I was going through a variety of bunch of different things. I was looking at plasma, I was looking at a variety of different things. And I'm just talking about waking up after having, let's just say, dreams, and then hitting the whiteboard and just going crazy. Okay, just designing this stuff, not really knowing what it is that I'm designing. Because I've never been an engineer set out to, I'm not gonna wake up one day and think, yeah, screw it, I'm gonna build a free energy engine, right? But I was getting these downloads, I just started drawing stuff down, okay? 6 months later, I'm in a laboratory of a top scientist, and I see the very things in his lab that he's working on that I drew on a whiteboard 6 months prior. And I'm like, dude, what the frickin' hell? So there's definitely validity behind it. And because there's genuine validity behind it, there is a way of building because of Bitcoin, something that resembles something very, very, very close to that. And you're one of the very few people that I've actually spoken to who even sees it as a very cool connection between, say, a spiritual world and, let's say, for lack of a better term, the real world, and how these things are re-manifesting themselves. And that's like another one of the points I like to make. I know something that you've jumped on, I definitely want to hear your opinion on this, is we have, I guess, a society right now today who tend to really look up to, say, scientists, intellectuals who are trying to recreate things that nature are just rocking and rolling and doing without any form of adulation, right? So artificial intelligence is a perfect example. AI gets cracked, irrespective of what the ramifications are, if it's done in a really irresponsible way, that person will still probably end up getting a Nobel Prize or something of the sort, right? But then any human being on the planet, irrespective of, say, even severe, some cases, really severe health conditions, can still procreate, right? Whatever it is that we're trying to do, nature should always be the inspiration. Do you understand nature better, then technology really, really, really makes a lot of sense. So where do you see things going, I guess? Pushing things down further along down the line, 5 years down the line, in relation to, say, Bitcoin, and what more would you like to see as a result of Bitcoin as a technology to deliver the kind of world that you and I clearly see?
I definitely, one of the things I want to see realized in our lifetime, I guess, is more harmonization of the people, tech, and nature in general, right? That's like a personal thing. The nature side, I haven't brought in too much into the business directly, but I bring it in indirectly, right? I will probably start to come out more and more about the wolf stuff and that side of things. But Bitcoin itself, I think it's here, I know it's here to stay, right? Right now, we've been planning out for the next 10, 20 years, hence why like some of our services are still more generic, like community engagement, marketing, that sort of stuff, right? But where we know where Bitcoin is headed. The only thing, right, is that I guess some of the frustrating things is that, we see what's happening with BTC, et cetera. But, don't get frustrated, just get inspired and motivated to like do more. And so even for our positioning with Bitcoin, for us as a company, it's very much in line with sort of, again, the bridging, right? Acting as, and I use this analogy a lot about the gold, right? During the gold rush, right? Who was making the most money, right? The ones, digging for gold or the shovels, exactly. So that's how we position ourselves. But it's funny, and even in the startup world, people are like, oh, what do you do? What are you building? And I'm like, oh, we're service providers. We're doing consulting and advisory. But we are going to build some things because we are looking at that in the background. But I needed to sort of stabilize, right? Things that I knew would bring in money for us, because I'm also seeing a lot of businesses who have raised a lot of capital but can't make money for shit. At least for us, right? I intentionally wanted to start the business with no outside funding, right? And I intentionally wanted to do this like slow, because I want to build things that last, like Bitcoin itself. And so what that has meant is that you don't get these massive raises of money, right? In the startup world, everybody celebrates debt like insanely. But now what's happening, right? I'm noticing a shift, right? Where investors are now, they saw what happened with WeWork, and now they're like, shit, maybe we should go after businesses that are actually profitable, going back to the fundamentals. Tangible. Right? Going back 100%. To the fundamentals. So, I've just pushed back on most people and say, we're building this slowly. We're 7% profitable this year. And I was like, yay, how many people can actually say they're profitable in their first year? Just going back to fundamentals again. And that's what I see Bitcoin as. It's like the fundamentals being the most important. That's what I align with. That's what I resonate with. And the fundamentals also
I commend that.
Connected to nature, man. The indigenous, the natives, like I know in my blood and in all my feels that a lot of things are about sort of like the return of that type of wisdom, right? Bitcoin, I just saw as a manifestation of that. That's why I look at the design, and when I speak to Craig, I'm like, man, damn it, Craig. I know he's aware of a lot. But sometimes I wonder if he's even aware of just how, like, on so many fronts, like even spiritually, this shit goes.
And that's something that's kind of been a continuous thought process with me. And just like when I sit down with, say, very seldom, I've only ever sat down with like a clairvoyant 3 times in my life. So it's not like a regular thing. But each time, it's always with that same healthy skepticism, whereas I'm not going to help you do your job. I want to see if you're good.
Right.
Same.
I was like, you show me you could do this shit, right?
Just like, come on.
Yeah. It's like, read me, motherfucker. But I even done the same thing with Craig, right? Because I was like, all right, in terms of someone who's Satoshi, you fit the bill better than anyone else it is that I've seen. But healthy skepticism, you haven't got me sold completely yet. So I'm going to test you out, right? And I already had a lot of this kind of mathematical stuff that I saw in Bitcoin that really connected with the spiritual aspect in a much deeper way. But then I looked at it from an engineering standpoint, and I was like, Bitcoin is 100 times more impressive than anyone even knows right now. 100 times more impressive than anyone even realizes right now. And the irony is after my first conversation with Craig, I actually thought even he doesn't see just how incredible what it is that he's created, right? I'm sure he obviously sees how incredible it is what he's created, but it goes deeper. It goes a lot deeper. And I've had like these conversations with him, which has given me a lot of clarity as to, there's a lot of aspects with it that are still untapped, very much still untapped. And I definitely have my own approach. I'm not saying he endorses what I'm saying inside Bitcoin or not, but I know what I see and I don't need the endorsement, right? Bitcoin has a power inside it that right now, for all intents and purposes, is very much untapped, okay? And the approach that you're taking is commendable, and it's actually the one that I took. So when I set up 5 years ago, I didn't want to just sprint out the gates. I was like, this is a new space. I'm going to take a more consultative approach. We set up our advisory model first. I'm going to help educate people, but in true law of one fashion, I learn to teach and I teach to learn, right? So it doesn't matter who I'm speaking to. If that person is 10 years old and I've got to educate that person, well, guess what? I have to take this amount of knowledge and pull it into a package that a 10-year-old can understand. Guess who's getting a lesson now? It's me, right? I'm getting a lesson because I need to know my information that much better to repackage it, right? So there's always this great feedback loop. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start off with that, right? Because it's just my natural nature. I'm going to start off with that. And while I'm doing that, I've got the time to really see how this space is panning out. And I had many opportunities where I could have just ran out the gates with the whole ICO craze and all these other variety of different things. But what's held us in great stead is that we took the more tortoise approach as opposed to the hare, and we became observers. And we really, really wanted to understand, where's this space really going? I'm not going with the herd because the herd is being steered towards a dark path right now. Instead, everyone here at Bitstocks stuck their head up the herd and was like, yeah, this stuff ain't what we think it is. We need to be going in that direction. And we need to be patient, and we need to wait even to our own detriment, or even maybe to some clients' disagreement, because we did have clients disagreeing with some of the decisions it is that we've made, right? But ultimately, when you know that you can see the space for what it truly is, and you haven't been washed away with herd mentality and herd thinking, that is when you're going to have the ability tied into how you started this with passion, combine that with sound logic and taking your time with things to work things out. You're going to be able to have the sight to create something that no one else can see. And that is the great benefit sometimes of just slowing things down in order to really understand. Risk your own freaking capital, right? Risk your own capital, risk your own time. Because once you do crack it and you have worked out something that the sheep didn't see, guess what? Investors are going to be all over you for taking that approach, because you've de-risked your business model. You've taken the time to really learn your market, right? And you've developed a strategy that you can now execute with the capital you now need. And you've built a whole empirical evidence case to say, I know what I was talking about, right? So, dude, I massively commend that approach, and I wish you nothing but great luck. And I'm sure we're going to be doing loads of collaborations and whatever we can do on our end to help and aid you in your mission. We're definitely be there backing you in your corner. And I imagine definitely likewise on your side.
Bro.
Right. Before we wrap things up, mate, is there anything else that you'd like to cover? Any points that you'd like to raise or subjects?
So
or
many
things out there that you want to talk on?
So many to talk about, man. I had to I've had to take notes because so many things right while you're talking.
Go for it.
Okay, I guess since we're wrapping up now, divine timing. That's something I've learned. I am naturally I'm a fire sign. I'm a triple fire sign.
Okay.
Yeah. So you may understand this. I am a Leo sun, Saggy moon, and I'm also a fire tiger in terms of Chinese astrology. So my lesson has been in slowing down, right? In understanding patience. And that's what the wolf side has taught me. So, we're talking about like observation. I got into Bitcoin in 2013. Definitely a lot of observation over the years. Didn't pick up until about 2016 or 17 when I got more engaged with the community. And then the way that I looked at it was like, wolves in the shadow. Like wolves are ecosystem builders. And even though they are smaller in numbers, they have such a massive impact on the entire ecosystem. So much so, there's a video called How Wolves Change Rivers. I don't know if you've seen that or not or heard of it, but highly recommend. If you want to get an idea of what we are doing as a company, it is literally that. We understand the importance of doing things on the edges that actually impact the entire ecosystem. And that's sort of the approach. And then the final bit is like the power of small, micro. You're talking before about small things being important. You look at Bitcoin and the power of microtransactions, right? And, the unbanked part of the world that is being untapped as well, because, they're considered to be smaller, they're insignificant. That's not the case. We're seeing sort of a snapback from the large scale up networks down to smaller groups. Why? Because there's more power in these clusters. And, we call them micro communities. Right? So these micro communities now is also being reflected in things like Facebook's shift to focusing on groups, right? And because they're realizing numbers actually don't mean jack anymore because they can be manipulated as well. People are seeking intimacy, people are seeking people, deeper relationships, meaningful ones. And with that, it's a good thing. And wolves really teach you how to keep that harmony when you go into those small groups again, because you get that right, it has a much wider impact on everything else naturally.
Love that. Just want to expand a little bit more on the microtransaction aspect. So what you guys plan on doing around that? Why is microtransactions, is that one of the key reasons why you support SV? Why microtransactions for you? What are you planning to utilize it for?
Because I've been involved, I've done a lot of different things, but being involved in like this space of like community, right? Where I'm often looking at just social behavior. And, with guys like Twitch, what they're doing. And I've seen how online behaviors get influenced, right, by things like microtransactions. And I think when you can add the financial component to the microtransactions, I think it's going to have huge ramifications on social behavior. All of them might not be good, but it will be there nonetheless. And I want to understand those things now, which is why I have a close eye on, folks like Twitch, City on Chain, right? And I think we haven't even begun there, because I think it's going to get really interesting when you have, because I saw Jack Dorsey from Twitter now, he's going to Africa. He's going to live there for like 3 to 6 months. And I see why, because I was in South Africa last year and I was like, shit, there's a lot happening here. And when you get all of these other types of entrepreneurs, all of a sudden being able to start trading and innovating, right? They're going to come up with things that we just never thought of. And I think the microtransactions component is going to be one of the killer features, in my opinion, from a community perspective.
Totally agree. And it's a necessary aspect to the story of Bitcoin that really is going to enable the initiation of the vision that we all speak about as a destination, right? And that's why it was so important to bring that aspect back. So important to bring that aspect back. And this is what I mean by We need to enable. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is, in its original form, its limitations are human imagination. If the network's just running as it should be, and it's back to its original base form that allows you to be creative, then its limitation genuinely was the imagination of the user using it, right? And we have to go back to that. We must go back to that, because no one can be the foremost authority and say, this is the trajectory of humanity and it's written in stone. Like, I'm gonna tell everybody what every human being and every business wants on this planet, and I'm gonna say it will all fit inside 1 megabyte, right? Now, if you're saying that because there's a technical argument that says why you can't go beyond that, I'll hear you out. But there never, ever was. There never, ever was.
It's just fear.
It's just fear. It's absolutely fear. And what that does is it really robs and takes away from the promise of what Bitcoin is. And touching on to the last points that you was making is, we really genuinely unlock this and we allow human creativity to just thrive, right? And we start bringing together communities and educating them as to what the benefits are of this tool, and then saying, just go at it, right? Just go at it. Having that when we're moving into a data-based economy genuinely does mean that every state of consciousness on this planet is an oil field, right? And that, when people really understand that statement, and then you look at Africa, you look at India, you look at South America, right? You look at all these other places in between that have amazing human beings, amazing populations, but have been underserved for whatever reason, whether it be at a governmental level, financial level, or combination of the both, for whatever reason, could then connect to a new economy, right? A new way of communicating, a new technology that brings human beings together. That is what sparks the next equivalent to the Industrial Revolution, in my opinion. And we're so close to it. I don't think people realize just how close we are to a world that resembles the one that we saw from a technological standpoint in Ready Player One. But imagine a world that you see in, say, an example like Ready Player One, without the fact that everyone in Ready Player One is basically running away from the real world because it's so screwed up, right? But if you just look at the technologies that you can have, say, a pair of goggles that someone in Africa can wear and brings them in this office right now, right? And this person is working in a virtual environment with me collectively on a project that I'm working on. Or I, as a company, can have a global job board where the jobs are split up and you have incentive-based jobs, and those jobs can be taken by any participant around the world, and they can build up their own feedback system. Because when you have a digital ID system that is your own ID linked to, say, Bitcoin SV blockchain, then you can build a reputational system in so many different ways. You're combining LinkedIn, you're combining Facebook, you're combining Twitter, you're combining so many different things into that ID, and people can then, as a company, I can make hiring decisions based off that. The fact that you're in Singapore and I'm here in London right now, we're breaking that barrier with Skype, right, with this laptop. But beyond that, can you show me what else you're working on in your office right now? And can I feel like I'm in your office and help you work on that? No. But the technology is actually just months away. HoloLens 2, Microsoft, right? They're shipping those right now. But the issue is they're $3,500. Okay, so a few years down the line, that cost has come drastically down, and the way that we communicate and we exist, just from a business standpoint, is going to drastically change. So these economies and these local communities that get pushed out fringe and just pushed out towards the fringes can now start getting drastically included. And I've got so much respect for what it is that you're doing, George, because this path is not carved, right? Mixing, say, these types of ideals and understandings and teachings, and then applying it to actually make a big impact in terms of business. And a big impact is what's required, and a big impact is what's needed. And with a big impact, obviously it's going to come with, I hope, a very strong financial reward as well for all of those involved. And it should be, because this is the great aspect of approaching business this way. You approach business this way, profit doesn't need to be a dirty word, okay? And you can invite the whole community to help this machine build a wealth generating system for all those who interact with it. And then it becomes something that the community owns. And this is the great thing about slowing down and observing and working things out, because 2.5 years ago, I would have described what I'm explaining in the sense that I needed decentralized corporation, right? I was on the whole decentralization bandwagon that everyone else was on, yeah? And the more that I really understood what my objectives really actually are, okay? It's about incentives, it's about transparency, and it's about accountability, right? And you nail these aspects, people will join you to help you build and become part of what it is that you're building. It's about distribution. It's not about decentralization. And it's really refreshing, my brother, to see that you're on a very, very similar mission. No, it's great. Genuinely, man. On a very, very, from the bottom of my heart, man, it's beautiful to see.
Likewise, man. You know, it's both ways. That's why I always put those 2 eyes emoji for you, man. I see you. I see you.
I see you too, brother. I see you too. Well, look, you're in London for CoinGeek, right?
The plan is, yes. I haven't booked my tickets yet, but the plan is to be.
Cool.
So it'll be great
if you're in London for CoinGeek, make sure you come down to the office. We'll do a proper sit down, full-blown setup. We'll have a proper hash out, and we could talk for literally 2 hours about anything it is that you want to talk about. In the interim, I tell you what we will do. Let's put this out there and challenge the community to get some questions prepared for us. So if you are in London, we'll hash it out. And if you're not in London, we'll just do this again and we go in way more detail.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, from my end, always, any last thoughts?
Any last thoughts, man? Nah, like, cause if I say last, we said last, and now we just.
Yeah, I know, right?
So I'm gonna say no. Good.
Yeah.
You know, I'll maybe just end with my favorite saying, which is through patience and persistence, it will come. The it will come, actually, I have in Tuvalu, and it's Tenalo e Fanatu, passed down from my great grandfather, and that'll be another story for another time.
100%, my brother. So with patience and persistence, it will come.
Yep.
I'll leave it on that note too. So to everyone, as always, great conversation. And I just love seeing people like George in this space spitting out a very similar message to what we're trying to put out there at Bitstocks, putting humanity first, not as a way of deflecting from a business model. No, it's actually because it aids the business model, and the business model aids humanity. So that's great. Much more of it out there in this space, and I hope, George, you actually inspire more people in this space to be doing similar things, and I hope people fall over themselves to be involved in what it is that you're doing, my brother. So on that note, as always, peace, love, and light, everybody. Take care.
Girl.